Digital 410 Productions proudly presents the Fail to Fail podcast with your host, Don Abernathy.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Failed to Fail podcast, the Digital 410 Productions motivational podcast where we go out and search the land for people who found success on their own terms. They go out and do things that may have a high success rate, or perhaps they, growing up, took a wrong path as a child and everybody thought they'd be failures when they grew up, and yet despite all that adversity, they found their way to success. And today's guest on today's episode is going to be the farmer. She was a great student, had a great childhood, but she did find success in an industry that, well, is facing adversity nowadays in 2019, but we will let her explain all of that to you here shortly. First and foremost, I just want to thank our friends at Act Computers. Act Computers has been our sponsor here on the Digital 410 Network. Excuse my voice, I've been fighting multiple ailments, multiple medical issues. One of those things being the last 3 weeks I've been fighting off a cold, but I'll also get to that momentarily. But first, thank you so much to our fine sponsor, Act Computers, for sponsoring all of our podcasts on the Digital 410 Network. And Act Computers has been providing IT solutions to all of Southwest Florida since 2004. They specialize in veterinarian clinics as well as other businesses, large and small. And they do residential computer repair, laptop repair, cell phone repair, etc. If you need the footprint of your wireless network expanded, they can help you with that. If you have all these new wireless security devices like the Nest system, the Ring doorbell, the Nest cameras, all that stuff, they can take care of all that for you as well. So give them a call, 239-283-1120. And I know what you're saying, Don, I love to help you by helping your sponsors, but I don't live in Southwest Florida. How can Act Computers help me? They can help you by logging into your computer remotely directly from their website and helping you fix all of your minor computer issues. As long as you have internet connection, they can help you. Give them a call at 239-283-1120 or visit them at act-capecoral.com. Now, for those of you who are trying to better your life physically, you're getting into the active lifestyle, you may be running, you may be going to the gym, you may be doing yoga, you may be doing spin class, it doesn't matter, but you're doing something with your life that causes you to sweat profusely. It just goes with the realm of what you're doing, but it doesn't mean you have to suffer from sweat in the eyes and your hair getting in your face. Go to sleefs.com, sleefs.com. You can find all of your activewear needs, yoga pants, sweatbands. If you have kids playing football or you yourself play football, they have football gear there. Go to sleefs.com. Use the promo code D41040. That will save you 40% on your entire shopping cart, and they will kick some coins my way to help us continue expanding the network and provide content that you guys want to hear. And for some of you who do not know, we do have a legitimate URL for our website now. It is failedtofail.com. When you go to failedtofail.com, you can click on the Amazon link, save that to your favorites, or put it on your desktop. Do whatever it is you wish to do with it. And then when you shop on Amazon via your computer, simply click that link, and whenever you buy anything on Amazon, they will send us some referral money our way to once again help sponsor the shows and to build the network. And last plug, last but not least, no, that's a lie, 2 more plugs. While you're at failtofail.com, go ahead and click on the Patreon link on the right-hand side. Please sign up for one of our tiers. One's $1, one's $3.50 a month, and one is $7.50 a month. If you sign up for the $7 plan, you will get a free t-shirt from our web store sent to you. We will reach out to you on month 2, send you a URL to our web store. All you have to do is select the shirt you want, send us the URL back with the size and the color. We will order it and send it your way, no cost to you. So there's all you got to do. Visit Sleeves, use the promo code if you're looking for activewear. Use the Amazon link on our website, and if you want, it'd be great if you joined patreon.com. You can do all those things at failtofail.com or d-410.com. Now, they say as you get older, your body changes, and things that you've never had issues with before become issues, and I am learning this at the age of 41. The older I'm getting, my skin's getting more delicate, more sensitive. No, this is not a beginning of another spot for some skincare product. I have just experienced in the last 24 hours the worst annoyance and a little bit of pain that I've ever suffered. And we really can't track down the source of the pain, except for I do have an idea, and here's what it is. Here in Florida, at least I've never had a problem with this elsewhere, I'm sure people do, but it seems like it happens more here in Florida than anywhere else. The condensation drip tray of our AC units that leak out through the pipe outside of our houses and into the yards, they tend to get clogged up with grass, dirt, mold, insect nesting, what have you. And then so what happens is the condensation tray in your garage overflows and floods out your garage. The easy solution for this is to simply take a small shop vac, plug it into the drain port on the side of your house, remove the filter from it, and suck all the crap out. You suck it, dump it, suck it, dump it, suck it, dump it, and you're done. And so I did this on Saturday, and then I left my shop vac in my garage, left it open to air out. And then yesterday, being Wednesday, I had to go do a maintenance job for one of my IT clients. And one of the things we do on our maintenance is we vacuum out the computers. And so since I just used the shop vac to suck water out of my AC lines, I had to put a new filter on it, which means I opened up the shop vac, I used my hands on the inside, and I put a new filter in it. I went out and did the job, and about 10 minutes after finishing the job, my hands just started itching terribly. Itching. I went to the next job, I told my business partner, I said, man, my hands are itching, it won't stop. And so now I'm fighting the cold, my hands are itching, I got stuffed up nose, stuffed up head. And I get done with that job, I rush home. Before I even get home, I stop at a Walgreens, and I'm eating Benadryl before I even make it to the front counter, just to try to get the stop. Just to get that itch to stop. It's horrible. It's driving me nuts. And then later on, we're driving with the family out to eat, and my ankle starts itching down by my leg. I'm scratching my ankle, and then the back of my neck starts itching. I go home, take a shower, and I am breaking out in hives all over my legs, my pelvis region. And I'm like, what in the holy heck did I get into? Why am I having this breakout? I'm getting these big red spots on my hands. And so then I get up and I rush out to Walmart and I get some cortisone 10. Clearly I got into something I'm having an allergic reaction to. I don't know what it is. I've never been allergic to anything my entire life. So I wake up at 2 o'clock this morning and my feet and my hands are on fire and I'm having even a harder time breathing. And the hives have spread substantially and they're getting bigger. And I'm getting concerned. I'm like, do I have hives in my lungs? Is that why I can't breathe? And the crazy thing was my hands and feet were hurting so bad. The only way I can explain it is it felt like I had been working in a rock quarry for 12 hours the day before barefoot, and I was required to move rocks by hand. Like my hand and feet were just completely raw feeling. So I dealt with that for like an hour and a half. I passed out, woke up this morning, went down to convenient care, and they don't know what caused it. They think my hypothesis on the vacuum cleaner is probably correct. I probably touched some mold or something that was in that pipe that's been in there that I just clearly had an allergic reaction to. Shot me in the ass with a huge dose of steroids. And I'll be honest with you, that hurt worse than my hands and feet. Not the needle, mind you, no. After they do it and you're sitting there, they make you sit there for 15 minutes because I guess there's a history of people having reactions to it where they get sick and can't drive home. So I'm laying on the table and the nurse is like, how do you feel? I was like, I feel like you just hit me in the ass with a baseball. It literally, my whole ass cheek was just radiating in pain. It hurt worse than my hands and feet. But anyhow, get a nice doctor's visit bill, a shot in the ass, prescription for some more steroids. 5 hours later, the rash on my feet are gone, the rash on my elbows are gone, the rash on my hands are getting better, and the area that was affected the most, which was my pelvic region, is starting to clear up. It still itches a little bit, but I have never experienced a pain like that in my life from, a non-real injury. It almost feels like, a 1 degree burn on your hands and feet. Horrible. Wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I was supposed to do this editing last night to get the show up for you today, but I was dealing with all these pains. So now the itching's gone away, the pain's gone away. I'm still congested in the head. I'm still fighting this head cold. I still sound like crap on the mic, but we will get through this. And so now that we got all the housekeeping out of the way, my health status up out of the way. Oh, by the way, I haven't decided. I was going to sign up for a 5K yesterday, and then I started having all these problems with my feet, my hands, and I was like, well, clearly I can't run a 5K this weekend, and good thing I didn't sign up or I'd be out the money. But here it is, 9:30 p.m. on Thursday. Cutoffs aren't done until tomorrow on Friday, so I might just go ahead and pull the trigger and run a 5K Saturday, even though I'm still a little itchy. Whenever I set my mind to something like that, I don't like to find excuses for not doing something. I'd rather find an excuse to do it. Meaning, hey, I'm not at 100%. I still got itchy feet and itchy hands. Everybody you would talk to would probably say, yeah, you probably shouldn't do it. But maybe instead of looking for a reason not to do it, I should find an excuse to do it. And that is, I have been suffering from knee pain for like the last 3 weeks as well. I'm a hot mess, I know. And finally on Monday, I put in the first decent time in a long time. I ran out 3.2 miles in 29 minutes, which is almost back to my last 5K time. I'm looking at my bibs on the wall right now. I think my last 5K time was 26 minutes. So I really want to run a 5K just to get back into it because I've been training for a half marathon. Then I started having knee pains. I want to do a Savage race in November. And so I really got to get back out on the course and make sure I can get that 3 miles in because the Savage race is 5 miles. You know, there's 5Ks or a dime a dozen down here, but I rarely see any 10Ks. So I need to find one of those. But the way it's going right now, I'm training for probably a 5K on Saturday and a Spartan race in November, which means I got to get back to the gym. But with all my illnesses, ailments, and pains, I haven't been to the gym in a while either. But I'm not going to allow myself to fail in my fitness because I am down 30 pounds. And the whole purpose of this podcast, we talk about things on this show that we don't talk about in other places because this is this is more for a particular audience of people who are looking to be motivated. Whereas, the audience for the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, they're strictly interested in World War II. And, the Waterman D Train show, it's more cynical stuff, more comedian style stuff, more being jerks to each other. And so by having 3 podcasts, it allows each one of my personalities to get out in their own way. And so we're heading down the positive road. Let's get to it. And joining us on the phone now is a person I've known for a long, long time, but we will get into that more later. We want that to happen naturally. She is a very accomplished young lady and woman in the field that she has chosen. And it's a very interesting field, and we will let that come to be here momentarily, but we will start with her background. Miss Annie Woods. Annie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks.
How is the weather in Kentucky?
It's very hot and humid.
It's been raining here nonstop like crazy. I do have an all-black truck, and when I got into it yesterday, the thermostat said 113 degrees. Luckily, it cooled down to a quick 97 after I drove for a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, we haven't had rain in a long time here, so it's been a little challenging. But yeah, I was just saying, I have a woman that works with me here on the farm, and we were loading up her car to do deliveries, and we were both just like, "Oh my gosh!" As soon as you walk outside, when your elbow creases start sweating, it's hot.
Yeah, I was working on my truck the other day, and I was wearing rubber gloves, and they just completely filled up with water, and I just dumped them out. But anyhow, you have found success in a very interesting way, in a non-conventional field, especially in 2019, and especially in northern Kentucky, because, most of the farmland that used to be there is now rich, nice neighborhoods and golf courses.
Yep.
And the fact that you have been so successful in your field, and the cool way you go about doing what you do for a living, I really wanted to have you on this podcast because, part of the theme of this podcast is 2 things, really. One, it started out, one of the first goals I had was to find people who found success despite their upbringing or the opinions people thought of them. Maybe when they were growing up, they didn't do great in school. Maybe they got into a lot of trouble. Maybe the authority figures in their town, their counselors thought, well, this guy's going to be a loser or this girl's going to be a loser. And despite all that, they failed to fail. They became successful. But then I also kind of split it off to find people such as yourself who found success in fields that maybe people don't really consider anymore, or things that people find, really is not the mainstream. And before we unveil what it is you do for a living, let's get a little background on you. You grew up in northern Kentucky in Florence, Erlanger, and Big Bone area. Give a little backdrop on your childhood and growing up in northern Kentucky.
Sure. Where I live now is only 7 miles away from where my mom and dad live, in the same house where I grew up my entire life. So they've been in that house for over 40 years, still there. My childhood, I had, a pretty big backyard. We had 5 acres, little ranch house on 5 acres, and my dad always grew a garden in the backyard that we helped out in the summer, whether we liked it or not. And the funny thing is, when I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old, I hated working in the garden with my parents. It was as Kentucky is. It's very hot and humid in the summer, and I just thought it was miserable to be out there picking beans.
Well, not to mention that all
strange...
children hate forced labor.
Yeah. But, you know, where we grew up was kind of on the edge. It was out in a rural area, but not too rural. Like, we were still close to town, but we were still out by farm. So it was kind of that cusp between being really far out there and being still close enough to where it wasn't so difficult to drive into Florence and see a movie or whatever, you know. So yeah, I mean, it was a great childhood growing up. Like, I was a happy kid. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I finished high school, but it was pretty important, you know, especially to my mom, who was a teacher, that I go to college, and I'd always done pretty well in school, so I decided I was going to go that route, and I kind of decided I'm going to study biology because I thought I don't really know what I want to do as a career, but I could take a degree in biology and go lots of different ways with it. And I liked science. You know, I liked science and math and that kind of stuff. So it just seemed like a broad enough major to take on, you know, going into college, that I'd kind of figure it out along the way. And, you know, I sort of did, you know, I ended up going to the University of Kentucky for college and studying biology. And what I realized while I was there is I really liked studying ecology and conservation, anything having to do with outdoors and wildlife and the environment. And I kind of just stayed on that path and let it take me where it was going to take me, you know, until I kind of landed here about 5 or 6 years ago in what I see as my kind of lifelong career and pursuit now.
Now, part of your studies, correct me if I'm wrong, you ended up basically doing some field research, did you not, as part of your senior thesis or part of your study, where you basically lived out in a cabin out in the middle of the woods, and you're by no means and don't take it as personally, you're by no means a huge authoritarian type, you know, huge woman. You're petite, rather short, and soft-spoken, and your family's concerns or the thought of you being out in a cabin miles away from any large city or even a hospital, you know, it concerned them a little bit, but you found independence, and more importantly, you were surrounded by your classroom. I mean, that was what you were wanting to study.
Yes.
And you probably...
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would imagine not only did you learn a lot about what you were studying, but you probably learned a lot about yourself and what you were able to do when pushed into a corner.
Yeah. So I ended up living in really far upstate New York in the Adirondack Mountains. And whenever you say New York, people always get the idea of New York City, but this is about as far on the other end of the spectrum as you can imagine. The Adirondack Park is one of the largest, most wild places, you know, east of the Mississippi. And I ended up, after I finished, you know, at UK, I ended up deciding to go to grad school, and I ended up in Syracuse, New York, and the school where I was studying had a forestry and wildlife research station in the Adirondacks. And so I ended up there. I got a job there. I lived on the property. It was a 15,000 acre property devoted solely to the study of forestry and wildlife. And yeah, I was in a cabin, and I didn't have any neighbors for miles. I loved it. It was wonderful. But yeah, my dad would come to visit and be like, you need a gun, and you got to keep all your doors locked. And, you know, he couldn't believe I was, like, living in this cabin, leaving all my doors unlocked. And, like, everybody around here leaves their doors unlocked, you know, because if you lock your door and you get locked out and it's negative 30 in the winter, you're screwed. So you better leave your house unlocked so you can get in.
Well, and not only that, but kind of the rule of thumb, especially when you're out in rural areas such as that, where, you know, black bear and brown bear are common, or even cold weather are common. It's kind of the neighborly thing to do, to leave your place unlocked. That way, if someone were to get lost or out in the woods injured, and they come across your home and you're not there, they can find refuge inside and wait out the storm, or even get in communication with help. And so it's
Yeah,
Go ahead.
there's so many. I was gonna say there's so many ways in which you're at the whim of nature in a place like that, whether it's the weather or animals, or just isolation. Yeah, and it's like you said, it's everybody keeps their doors unlocked because it's like you need to be able to take shelter if you need to.
Now, when you were up
But
in the woods doing your research, was there a
mhm.
particular were you primarily doing plant life, or were you tracking animals and kind of following the habitats and studying the natural instincts, or what may have you, of what the animals doing in that area? What did you spend most of your time up there studying?
Well, I was studying ecology, and ecology is really about the interactions of everything: plants, animals, the environment. So it was all over the board. I helped out on a lot of different research projects. From we were studying small mammals, so all the mice and voles and shrews and chipmunks and squirrels and everything that were living out in the forest, and looking at how different logging techniques in the forest would affect the populations of those animals. We were also looking at every fall the amount of seeds, the seed rain that would come out of the trees, which is the food for all those small mammals. And so we were looking at from year to year, how does the amount of seeds produced from the trees affect the population of the small mammals from year to year, up to the weasels that would eat the mice, stuff like that. We would do track counts in the winter just to see what was out and moving around in the winter. I've done owl surveys. It's been all over the board. I worked on a snail project, so I really was exposed to a lot of different aspects of of both wildlife and plant life out there in the woods. And I loved getting more in tune with nature, like really starting to see the bigger picture of all those processes that were going on, out in the woods on a daily basis that, maybe a lot of people wouldn't be exposed to unless they really stopped and paid attention to it. And so I think hand in hand with that, when you're studying nature in that way, you start to think about, okay, what as a human being, what's my impact on all of this? And so, I was doing science and I saw myself as a scientist, but I also thought, is there another way? Like, what else can I do with my daily life that would maybe bring about good for nature rather than be destructive or harmful or take away from all these really cool things that are going on out here on the land? And I think that's what eventually set me down this path that I'm on now, which is farming. But I'm farming in a way, that I think is more in tune with nature than maybe what people have pictured in their mind. Farming can look a lot of different ways, but it's really important to me that the way that I'm doing it is really diversified and kind of helping nature out, or if at the very least not harming it. So.
Well, we all accept as a society, we've all accepted the concept that the beach recharges us. At least out here in Florida and California, we can all agree that the beach and the water recharge us. But what I think a lot of people tend to overlook, especially those who have never been in a country, those who grew up in the city, or those like myself who grew up in the country and then left,
mm-hmm.
The woods does the same thing as the beach does, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the quiet, or even just the sounds of birds, or
let's
wind.
get more scientific.
I mean,
what makes you feel better than tons of oxygen? What does trees produce?
Yes.
They consume carbon dioxide. They let off oxygen. And one of the things I rediscovered when I got into my reenacting hobby, and I would go out and sleep on the ground underneath a 7-year-old piece of canvas, is how much better I felt at the end of the weekend. I know that sounds weird. How can sleeping on the hard ground make you feel better? Well, no pun intended, but you're grounded. You're getting back to your roots.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself into what we as a human species used to deal with back in our ancestor age, which is laying on the ground, being around nature. You wake up early automatically. Anytime I go reenacting, I don't set my alarm clock. I automatically wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning. Yes, sometimes it's 52 degrees and it happens, but that's when the oxygen, that's when the animals, that's when you get back to nature. And that's one of my favorite things about doing my reenacting is that is the only time people will accept the fact that I won't reply to their text because phones didn't exist in 1942. And so I can go out and sleep on the ground. At the end of the day, when the public leaves, we all sit around a campfire. No phones. We play cards, we drink, we talk. We socialize like we used to before we all got inundated with technology. And so for those of you listening to this, if you haven't been camping since you were a kid, or you haven't been out to the woods for more than an hour and a half when you take your kids to feed the deer, which you're not supposed to do in the city anyhow, I strongly recommend you go down to Walmart, buy yourself a cheap tent. You can get sleeping bags for like $10 a piece. Go camping, get back to nature. It will recharge you, just like the beach does. But there's something more natural, ironically, or not ironically, about going camping, sleeping on the ground. Don't take the yoga mat. Don't take an air mattress, a sleeping bag, or if you want to be hardcore, a wool blanket. And get back to your roots. Recharge. I feel so much better when I spent 2 days sleeping on the ground. I can't explain it, but that's the way that it is.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that when I lived up in the mountains, that was a side effect of, I loved being there. I loved being close to nature. But one of the things was there was no cell phone service where I lived.
Mm-hmm.
There was, the grocery store was a 45-minute drive away. I could jump into a lake at the end of the day if I had a hot day or whatever. Like, it was all right there, and I wasn't distracted by technology necessarily. We had internet at my office where I would go in and work, but I didn't have it at home, and I picked up so many new skills and hobbies while I was living up there because, I couldn't just flick on the TV. I couldn't start Googling something or go down a rabbit hole on Instagram or anything. I started playing music. I had friends in town that would get together twice a week and play music, and they handed me a bass guitar, and they were like, hey, we need somebody to play bass. Learn to play this. And it's like I gave myself the time to do that and the focus because there weren't as many distractions. And I think when I was there, it was in, I was there in my mid to late 20s, which I think are really formative years where you've kind of started down a path of work, but you really are deciding what it is you want to do with your life, And it's also, when you're living by yourself, you really have to work on yourself and figure out who you are because you're by yourself a lot of the time. And I think that I'm really grateful for the time that I had there, not only because of what I learned from studying forestry and wildlife, but because I was kind of out there, like you say, after those 2 days in a tent, you feel different. You start thinking different. You think a little more clearly. You stop and listen to things. And I think that was a really wonderful time for me to spend a few years of my life there and kind of put me on a path where I felt more independent and more clearly focused on paying attention to what it was that I wanted to do for work and with my life.
Well, it's so crazy how, especially as we get to be adults, and especially if you live in, the city or the suburbs, how something as simple as grabbing a patch of grass people take for granted. And not to belabor my reenacting stuff, but because I reenact and I spend time camping, and I'm sure you're the same way, if I'm out in the city and we're watching fireworks or we're outside watching a parade or whatever, and everybody's standing up on a sidewalk, I'll look around, I'll find a patch of grass, and I'll just sit down and lay back in the grass. And people look at me like, what's this weirdo doing? It's like, what are you doing? You're the one standing up. Sit down, enjoy the grass, lay down. There's no dog poop. There's no fire ants. Enjoy the grass. Pick it up, play with it. And just... and I do know there's a movement of people, especially like in New York City or Chicago, where they will go to their local parks, kick off their shoes, kick off their socks, and they will walk around just to get some feeling of nature to them to help revitalize them.
Yeah.
And so your time up in upstate New York came to a close, and you faced the one thing we all face at different points in our lives, and I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do until I was in my early 30s. But you started getting this inkling and this hankering to change things up, but to still keep it natural in nature. And obviously, with all your studying of wildlife and botany and all things of the environment, you started to, well, obviously through that curriculum, you begin to learn a lot about plant life and how to, and what type of soil they, succeed in, and the environment, and all that. So you already have this knowledge built, and like you said, you decided you wanted to go about being a farmer. What was the biggest hurdles when you finally decided to plant your pitchfork and throw on your overalls?
There were a lot of challenges. There's still a lot of challenges, too. But, there, one kind of step, when I left upstate New York, I decided I really wanted, like I said, I was by myself a lot, living there, and I really wanted to still be focused on the outdoors, and I wanted to be around people my age again.
Sure.
To have a little bit more social interaction. So I actually joined AmeriCorps, which, if folks are not familiar with that, it's like the Peace Corps, but in the United States. It's like you can volunteer for a year, and you have, food and room and board, and you're doing service, but kind of all your daily needs are met. And so I ended up doing that out in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State. And what we were doing, my group in AmeriCorps, was we were fixing trails out in wilderness areas in national forests. And so, again, I was outside, I had that nature contact, and it was very physical. Like, we're swinging tools, we're packing stuff into the backcountry. And like you said, I'm not a very big, muscular person, but I just really enjoyed knowing that I could challenge myself to do that and succeed. And then also, trail work is it's so rewarding, because you see maybe a really rutted out, worn out trail, or there's been a fire in an area, and like you need to open up a trail so people can get back out in the backcountry, and you can really see that tangible result at the end of the day.
And I think that's something we're missing out, not to interrupt you, but I think that's a key point and something we need to pause on for a second. I think that's one of the things that we miss in today's society. I mean, you hear that a lot with construction workers or people who build pools. Anybody who does something with their hands, it's nice to show up at a day's worth of work and then step back and see something that was there that wasn't there that morning, other than a stack of papers you printed out on a printer.
Yes.
And I think...
Yeah, and you can take a lot of pride in that work and know that somebody's going to benefit from it, not just you, whether it's, like you said, a pool, a road, a trail. You can be proud of the work, but at the end of the day, you're going to walk away and somebody's going to be using that and enjoying it.
And something
and
else...
It's going to be helping them.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in helping them get from point A to B, or whatever it is they need to do. And I think that is, like you said, a lot of jobs now, you don't have that tangible product at the end of the day. So it's a little more difficult. I know it for me, if I spend too much time inside on a computer, hard to get the brain to shut down at the end of the day, because you're kind of like, there's no end to the work, and yet you can't look back necessarily and show somebody, hey, here's what I did for the day. Whereas when I was doing trail work, it was very easy at the end of the day to say, hey, like, this is what we got accomplished. And by the way, I'm going to sleep really good tonight because I know that I did a good job today. I accomplished a lot.
And then let's not overlook the other thing you said, which I think is very important, which I believe is the result of why things like CrossFit, Savage Race, Tough Mudder, and all these obstacle courses are growing in popularity. And that is the sense of satisfaction and accomplishment one gets when they're able to do something that sucks, that's hard to do, but once they've completed doing that task, such as, digging, like you said, a fire line, or doing something like running 5 miles or doing one of these, obstacle course races. When you do something that's hard, that's uncomfortable, that can be time consuming, take a while to do, and at the end of the day you did it, and you say, wow, if you'd have told me 4 months ago I'd be doing this, I would have told you you're crazy. Or if you would have told me 4 months ago that I would run 14 miles in one day, I would have said you're off your rocker. And like I tell people when I go out running, I don't run for the feeling I get while I'm running, because that feeling sucks. I run for the feeling I get after the run is done, and I look back and say, wow, I just did that, or wow, I just built that. And I think that is something that we all need to find a little time in our busy schedule to do. If you're listening to this podcast and that's not something you've done, you rarely get out of your comfort zone, you rarely challenge yourself, whether it's physically or mentally. Maybe you're not a reader. Maybe you need to challenge yourself to read a non-fictional chapter book, something. Find something that you don't do on a regular basis or at all, and challenge yourself to do it, because you will be surprised how easy it is to do, because a lot of it's mental, just forcing yourself to do it, and two, the amount of accomplishment and self-worth that comes from doing that, and not to mention how you're going to expand your soul, how you're going to expand your intelligence, if it's something physical, how your body responds. I mean, let's be honest, you're out there farming every day, you have no need to go to a gym, right?
No. If anything, I always say people should be paying to come out here and do farming CrossFit, because it's like it's all the stuff you would do in CrossFit, but you're actually like helping me move stuff across the farm.
Yeah, Annie doesn't flip a tire to get fit. She flips a tire because the tractor got a flat and she has to replace it with her dad. So
yeah.
And so
but I think you're exactly right. Like at the end of those days you feel so good, and you really appreciate, because you're like, you feel kind of uncomfortable for a while you're going through the work, but like at the end of the day, at the end of trail work, at the end of the farm day, like that shower is like the best thing that ever happened to you. Your meal tastes so good. You appreciate a bar of chocolate. You know, when I was doing trail work, we wouldn't shower for 4 or 5 days at a time when we were out camping and working in backcountry, and you get in and you get your shower and you're like, you feel better than you've ever felt in your life, and that first beer you crack, you're just like, you just appreciate everything.
Beer, hell, let's go with just an ice cold, clean glass of water. When you're out there doing that sort of thing, especially if you're like me, you spend all weekend drinking out of a 75-year-old metal canteen that water comes out of another can, or you're out there hiking or living in, you start to realize how we even take for granted regular old city water. People, you drink water out of the tap. Well, if I drink it out of a 75-year-old canteen, you're damn straight I drink it out of the tap. I mean, it's so funny. I hear people say, I can't stand drinking plain water. It's like, well, clearly you've never been truly thirsty, because once you put yourself in a position where you are truly thirsty, then you will gain appreciation for water. And actually, after a while, you will start to lose appreciation for the sodas and the junk beverages.
Yeah. And, it's like, you kind of stand there sometimes, too, and you just flip a switch and there's light, or you turn on the faucet and hot water comes out, and it's like, this is like truly, like, these things are kind of magical that we have all of these at our fingertips, and you don't appreciate that till you don't have those creature comforts,
Yeah, unfortunately, about 2 years ago, I got reminded of that for 16 days after Hurricane Irma, and I didn't have power and water because I'm on well for 16 days, and so being in the hot Florida sun. But you know what? We're digressing. So now you're back in northern Kentucky. You have a plan of attack. You have something you want to do with your life. How do you go about it? Because a lot of people listen to this podcast, they're coming here for motivation. Maybe they have something they want to do in their life, but they don't know the first steps. And it's easy to, so in your particular case, how did you get, what was your first steps to achieving your goal?
Well, when I finished up with the trail work, one of the really amazing things was we were cooking using whole ingredients and stuff, even in the backcountry. And it was really important, the program that I was in, that they were sourcing a lot of the food locally from farms. And so I really started to make all these connections, right? Like, I want to do something that keeps me outdoors, that's physical. I really want to eat in this way, where I'm eating really good food, not a bunch of just like canned, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I want to use real ingredients. And I want to do something at the end of the day that I can see has tangible results and actually helps people out. And so that's how all of those things sort of coalesce. And I knew what I really needed to do was to farm, and farm in a way that was going to be, like I said, good for the environment, good for Mother Nature. And growing up in northern Kentucky, we had a garden in the backyard. I worked at McGlasson's Produce in Hebron. It was a farm stand, but I didn't know anything about actually farming, about running a farm. So I knew that the best way for me to figure this out was to actually just go work on a farm, and especially to go work on a farm that was doing it the way I kind of wanted to do it. And so I ended up working on a farm in Washington State for a couple of years as an apprentice. So, I mean, I was working on this farm. I was making $600 a month as an apprentice, but I had all the food I needed and I had a house there. And so I wasn't motivated by the money. I was motivated to learn every single piece of the farm, learn how to run my own farm just by being out there and doing. And, that used to be the way that a lot of people learned their trade, was to work under a master carpenter or blacksmith. And, it was very much like that situation. I was working on a farm for a couple that had been running this farm for about 6 or 7 years. They were very successful. They were selling a lot of produce into Seattle. And I just immersed myself in it. And it took about 2 years. And at that point, I was really ready to start my own farm. I was pretty fired up. I thought, I've only been doing this for 2 years, but, I think a lot of times people get stuck waiting for the right moment, or waiting to have the right amount of money to do something, or waiting until X, Y, or Z happens. And it's like, you'll spend your whole life waiting for the right moment, and it's just like, you kind of have to just jump, and you're going to screw some stuff up, and you maybe might not know everything, or you might not have all the resources you need. But if you believe in yourself, then you know that you're going to find a way to make it work. And that's just what I did. I moved back home to northern Kentucky, and I needed to find a place to farm. So I lined up a place to lease. Like, I didn't have any tools of my own. I did not even own a shovel, I had saved up some money, enough that I thought could get me through the first few months of setting up the farm, because, you're not going to have a tangible product to sell for several months.
Sure.
And it was a lot of, asking for help, and a lot of people, the wonderful thing about moving home to northern Kentucky is having a great network of family and friends that I had grown up with here that offered help in whatever way they could, whether that was like borrowing somebody's tractor or a tool to do something, borrowing a truck to haul something from here to there, all that kind of stuff. And, you just have to be, I think you have to know you're going to make mistakes, and also like not be too hard on yourself when you do make mistakes, because that's just the learning process. And so, of course, I look back to the first year and think, oh yeah, like I messed a lot of things up, but I wouldn't have learned those lessons otherwise. I still make mistakes. I try to grow a certain new crop and it fails, but you have to just pay attention to what you're doing, and pay attention to the results, and just try again until you get it right.
Well, and there's a reason why when you're reading stories or writing stories or telling stories, the wise person's always old. You'll never read a story about a young wise person. There's no such thing as a young 13-year-old wise man or wise girl living on top of a mountain where everybody seeks answers. No, wisdom comes with age, but more importantly, experience. And And so that experience is something you have to earn, and that's why as we all get older, we all just kind of shake our heads when we see young people doing silly things. And one of the sayings I have coined is one of the biggest practical jokes God has played on man is regardless of what age you are, when someone else older than you tells you not to do something because they've already done it and it's not going to turn out the way you planned, you just assume that they're old, they don't know what they're talking about, and you're going to do it better. And lo and behold, it blows up in your face, and they were right at the beginning. But it doesn't matter if you're 12 and they're 18, or you're 18 and they're 30, or you're 40 and they're 60. It's just one of the things we have to figure things out for ourselves, despite people's best efforts who are older than we are telling us not to do something because it's not going to work. But we don't listen. It's just the biggest practical joke that's ever been played on us. We will not ever listen.
I think there's a lot to that for sure. And yeah, you have to kind of put yourself through the trials, but you're right. It's definitely, I got a lot of advice, even from my dad, like with his garden and stuff at the beginning. And it's like, no, I want to do it my way.
Mm-hmm.
I got to figure this out my way. And for sure, if I could go back and change some things, I would. But at the same time, I think I had to. You don't really know what you're doing until you kind of get down the path and you look back and you're like, oh yeah, I had to do it. I had to do it that way to get where I am now,
And so you go back to Northern Kentucky, but you've been gone a while and technology changes. And with technology there comes new infrastructure, and Northern Kentucky is blowing up right now. Anything I order, if you go to Digital 410, my website, you go to fail2fail.com, you go to d-410.com, you order one of our shirts, they come from Hebron, Kentucky. Most of my Amazon packages come out of Florence and Erlanger. That area is blowing up in the warehouse, in the tech industry, because it's right on the main interstate. Semi trucks have direct access they can get, and it's not to mention it's right in the middle of the Midwest. And so all the farmlands that you and I used to look at growing up, they're being sold off. As I said at the beginning of this, a lot of those are private neighborhoods, but more sadly, a lot of them are turning into warehouses, manufacturing plant, which is good when it comes to employment, but it's bad when it's a person like yourself who's looking for farmland, and you finally you kind of realize that, okay, one, there's less farmlands available, and the farmland that is available, the price, either it's been in the same family for years and they're not selling, or the price is through the roof. And so how did you get past that hurdle?
You hit the nail on the head. That's one of my main challenges here is as a beginning farmer, trying to find land. The way I've faced that challenge to this point is I've just leased property. So this is my 6th year doing my farm here in Northern Kentucky. This is the 2nd property I've been on, and I rent from year to year. And it's one of the tough things about doing that is, when you're farming, you're in it for the long haul, and it's really important to take really good care of your soil. As somebody who studied biology, ecology, I know there's a whole ecosystem in the soil, and that's what's feeding my plants. And if we're going to have any resiliency at all to weather events or anything at all, you have to have a healthy soil for your plants. And so a lot of that is building your soil with compost, tilling in a way that is more gentle on the soil. For me, I avoid any chemicals at all, just because I'm trying to keep life in my soil for my plants. And, for me to do that for 3 years, build soil, move to another place.
And start all over.
Yeah, you're starting over. And I would love to be on a permanent piece of land, and not only for the purpose of building soil, but also I'd love to plant some fruit trees or have animals or some other perennial plants that come back year to year. But, when you're kind of stuck in the cycle of renting, you don't have that long-term promise that, if I plant this tree that's not going to bear fruit for several years, why would I do that if I don't know for sure I'm going to be here for several years? So yeah, I would love to be able to find farmland, but you're exactly right. You know, a lot of the names, the family names around here that have been here for generations farming, they're going to hold on to their land. And there are a lot of farms for sale, but they're priced way beyond what a farmer could pay for them. They're priced for developers, whether that's a subdivision, like you said, or, you know, more so now for industrial warehousing. And that's my main challenge to overcome now, is to figure out how to make farming and land ownership work in an area like this when land is valued for more than agriculture. But at the same time, you know, I think if you ask anybody around here, people have a lot of respect, I think, for farmers and for farming families, and they like to know that there's local agriculture going on in their community. And I think we have to figure out a way that we can kind of coexist. We can have some of the more modern, you know, industrial businesses and jobs, but not at the expense of seeing all the farms disappear. Because, you know, if you don't have people growing food in your community, you have to have it shipped from somewhere else. And so when you have something like you had, where everything shut down for a couple weeks after a hurricane or storm or something, you know, you got to be able to rely on the people around you to produce. Everybody needs to eat every day, you know, so you got to have food in your community. Well,
let's not overlook the importance of flavor. And here's what I say I know you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who's what are you talking about? Go down to Walmart, go down to your big box stores, and go buy a pack of grapes. They're super huge, they're inflated, but they have no flavor. They are so genetically modified, they just taste like little water bombs. The bigger the vegetable, the bigger the fruit, the less flavor it has, because they've been so genetically modified. And more importantly, we all know when it comes to bourbon or to Coors or to beer or to what have you, the flavor comes from the soil. And like you were saying before, you spend all this time preserving your soil, planting your soil, rotating your crops, tilling it a proper way. But the part of your brand for what you do, obviously, is the quality of what you're putting out, the color of what you're putting out, but more importantly, the taste. And so that a lot of that taste comes from the soil in which those plants are planted in. And so when you're picking up and moving, whether it's 2 blocks away or 5 miles away, that can affect the taste of your crop, and then you're starting all over again, and you're trying to build a brand, and that flavor is a huge part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And especially, you know, part of my business is selling to restaurants in Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati, and that's number one, the quality of the produce, not just how it looks. I mean, they're going to chop up that onion, or they're going to chop up a, you know, bell pepper or whatever, tomato, but they want the flavor. And so a lot of that, like you said, exactly comes from tending to the soil. And a lot of it also comes from, you know, not overwatering and not over fertilizing your crops, because it's like you say, the produce that you get in a grocery store, they want it to be as big as possible, because then it weighs more, then they get more money for it. But if that is all water, you're not actually, I mean, you're just getting a diluted, the flavor's diluted, the nutrients are diluted, all of that. And so, you know, it is very important to me that the produce is not only tastes good and looks good, but it's also really good for you, that it's nutrient dense. You know, that when you eat food from my farm, you're doing a lot of good for your body, you know, and I really feel like you can farm in such a way that you can do you can check all those boxes. You can have delicious food. It can be really good for you, and it can be doing good for the environment. I mean, if you walk out on the farm right now, you'll see so many different bees, pollinators, butterflies. I mean, all these insects and birds. Everybody wants to be on the farm, because we have all these plants flowering. There's no chemicals out there, no pesticides, no herbicides. You know, it's a happy place to be for if you're a wild insect, you know, and that's part of what we want to do too, is we want to have a really diversified set of crops so that we're attracting really good, native pollinators into the garden. And that I was just talking about this with a friend. I just heard on the radio they were saying that there's a fusarium, like a fungal wilt disease, that's hitting bananas in Central America that's never been there before, and it could decimate the banana population, and then you can't just walk into the grocery store and get your banana anymore.
Nope, we'll all be stuck eating plantains.
About the farmers, and how that would be devastating for them. But you kind of get backed into a corner when you only grow one thing, because it takes one disease or one pest invasion to wipe you out. But if you grow several crops and you lose one, it's not as big of a deal as if you're only growing one crop.
Well, and the nice thing, and you touched on a little bit, and we're going to jump into it right now, is you're in northern Kentucky, which is on the other side of the river of Cincinnati. And interestingly enough, I heard Emilio Estevez, he was on the Adam Carolla podcast about 2 months ago, and he said that his family is from Ohio. His mom's from Dayton, and his dad's from somewhere else in Ohio. And he has these roots that Ohio brings him back. And he's buying up property all over Cincinnati, because he said Cincinnati in 2019 is like New York City in 1960. Property is still available. You can walk around. Everything's close. It's booming. It's thriving. It's a hit place to be. And since you have people like Emilio Estevez and all these investors coming because northern Kentucky is blowing up in the tech center and all that, and Cincinnati's blown up, you as a small farmer and as someone who specializes in the things you do, you started out like most farmers do at the farmers market, but at some point word got around, and like you said, a lot of these little niche up and coming, I don't want to say hipster, but these hip cool places to go, these restaurants, they kind of found you, and you're starting to become their primary vendor, correct?
Yeah, you're right. I did start out my first year I was just solely selling at the farmers market. And that's because I having learned most of my farming in Seattle, I knew moving home to Kentucky, I needed to give myself a year to figure things out. And I didn't want to promise any vegetables to anybody. I just wanted to, whatever was good, I'll show up at the farmer's market and sell it. And I met a ton of people that way. Not only individual household customers that just want to buy to cook at home, but also chefs. Chefs, they go to the farmer's market because they know that's where the quality product is. And I met some chefs and started selling to restaurants, and then that's really picked up a lot. And I don't even do the farmer's market anymore. I just sell directly to restaurants, and then I have a community supported agriculture program. But the chefs, especially if it's an independently owned restaurant, the chefs have a lot more latitude in their purchasing. And so a lot of the restaurants that we work with are chef-owned restaurants. They're not corporate chain restaurants. Of course, we do work with them sometimes, but a lot of times for them, the bottom line is cheapest ingredients that we can get. Whereas if you're working with an independent restaurant, and there's a lot of them popping up in Cincinnati, really good food scene popping up, you're going to meet those chefs that want to get the best tasting product, and they're going to want to work with somebody like me who's kind of growing on a small scale, and can pick up the phone and talk to them, or text or email or whatever, say this is what's super fresh, this is what's seasonal, this is what tastes the best on the farm right now. And so you really develop a relationship. It's not just a transaction. It's working kind of one-on-one with those chefs to really bring the best ingredients possible to their menus.
Now, have you had one of your existing chefs come to you and say, Annie, I know you don't grow this particular produce, but there's something I want to put new on the menu. Do you have room on your farm to maybe start dipping your toes into this product, this plant, what have you? Have you done any sort of specialized farming or, kind of breeding of plants to help fulfill the needs of some of those little niche restaurants?
Yeah, for sure. I've tried. I definitely, every winter when it's a little slower at the restaurants and for the farm, I will sit down with the chefs that I work with and ask them about herbs or vegetables that they would like to see that I could try. I mean, you're always bounded by your climate, so there's just certain things I can't grow here necessarily. Sure. But I am always willing to try new things. And then so I've ended up growing one of the herbs that I grow now, it's called shiso. It's used a lot in Japanese cooking, but I had certain chefs asking me about it, and I tried it, and it grows really well here, especially in the summer. And so I grow it now, and I have a lot of restaurants that buy it from me because it's not necessarily something they can just get anywhere. You certainly can't walk down to Kroger and get shiso. You have to have a specialty grower willing to do that. And so I really love doing that because it challenges me to try out a new product and learn about it and its biology and how well it's going to grow here, and at the same time kind of fill that need for a restaurant. But I will say that a lot of the chefs that are truly invested in the idea of supporting local farms and kind of farm to table food, they're kind of like, whatever you grow, we'll buy it.
Sure.
You tell us what's good. And so it's really great to meet somebody who has that mindset. And I think if they're a really skilled chef and they're flexible, they will know what to do with what you bring them that's in season. And I think that the food speaks for itself. When you have great quality ingredients and then you have a really skilled chef, you're going to taste that in your meal.
Well, the nice thing about having that clientele too, a few things. One, you don't have to worry about, am I going to be able to sell this product to farmers market this weekend? Am I going to make my money back? Two, they understand the effort, energy, and the amount of work that goes into coming up with that produce, and so they're not trying to lowball you and getting the lowest prices, and so you can actually, have a little bit of a better margin and to invest into more equipment, more plants, and all that. But three, much like anything else, supply and demand. If more and more chefs are coming to you, but you only have so much product, you can raise those prices to adjust for that demand. And the ones who have been coming to you for the longest time, they will understand that, and they will help you meet the cost that you need to sell your product at.
Yeah, and I think especially when you're working with people that are independent business owners, they look at you and know you are an independent business owner too. And they know I'm not trying to necessarily gouge them on prices. We're just trying to, charge what we need to charge to be able to keep the farm afloat. I never looked at going into farming as a way of making a ton of money. I just wanted it to be solvent. I just wanted to be in the black every year because a lot of farms, the average farm in the U.S. Nets negative $1,300 a year, which is crazy. Most farmers are operating in the red every year on average. And so for me, the fact that I can even make a little bit of money when it's all said and done at the end of the year is a big win for me. And choosing to farm is it's choosing a lifestyle. This allows me to go out and work outside every day, to be in nature, to observe, to interact, to eat wonderful meals 3 times a day. So it's about a way that I can live my life, and at the same time, I don't have to commute in and necessarily have an office job to support my addiction to farming and living on a farm. It's like I need this to pay for itself. And so I've always looked at it as I do have to run this as a business, and I have to pay attention to prices, and I have to make the smartest moves. And so for me, going from the farmer's market to selling directly to restaurants, that was a smart business move for me because it's like you say, you just work all day long, show up at the farmer's market, and if nobody shows up to buy it, you're going home with all that at the end of the day. And so I quickly realized, I needed, for a small farm like me, I needed to work directly with customers that were going to order what they want. I'd pick the order. There's very little waste now going out and harvesting or trying to sell stuff. It's sold before we even pick it. And so that really allows me to be more efficient and to make this business work so that I can keep doing it.
Now, I know like a year ago, the local Cincinnati newspaper did an article on you about successful women in northern Kentucky. And one of the questions you said in there that you get asked quite a bit, or at least at the time, and I don't know if this was during your first land rental or your second, is that people kept asking you, well, you're only farming an acre of land. Why don't you go bigger? Why don't you go bigger? And your kind of answer is because I can achieve what I want to achieve and I can manage what I have at this size, and I have no interest in going bigger. Do you still feel that way?
Yeah, one of the things that I always say when people say that is, I would rather there be more farmers like me on an acre than for me to be in charge of, 50 acres. When you scale up in that way, a lot of it has to be mechanized. You have to have a big pool of employees. And I think there's merit in it for sure. And I think that some people are really attracted to that scale of farm. And like, if we're going to grow good food for schools or hospitals, we have to have farms that size growing produce. But for me, the scale that I'm at really fits my personality. You know what I mean? And it
Sure.
makes me happy and it works. Whereas I feel like I'd be out of my comfort zone, running a giant farm. And so for me, it's more important to work at the scale that I know is right for me and kind of right for my clientele. But also, I feel it's really important to promote farming to people that are interested in getting into it and want to make that leap. And so, I employ a few people on the farm every year, and in a way, I'm kind of looking at it as a turnaround from I was apprentice on a farm. That's how I learned. I apprenticed on somebody's farm. I want to give people the opportunity now to learn how to farm too, and to have a more one-on-one type of relationship with my employees. And my friend Chris worked with me the first 4 years on the farm, and then he went home. He's from Utah. He went home and started his own farm, So even if it's just 1% at a time every few years, if we could spin off some like new farmers and have another small farm out there, then to me that's a huge success as well. And I know myself. I know through all of the work I've done that I want to be the one out there, outside, doing the farming, seeing the results, hands in the soil. And I worry about if I get too big, then do I just become a manager? You know what I mean? And lose that contact with what it was that got me doing this in the first place.
Now, if you were to come across a young lady, or even just a regular age, a woman of any age of that matter, and they're telling you that, hey, I have an interest in something I want to do, but it's really more of a man's market, or something that's more in the men's world, quote unquote, whether it's farming, wanting to be a mechanic, wanting to start my own company where I take down old barns and refurbish the wood and resell it. But I'm a little nervous, and how can I expect to succeed in that world? What advice would you give them?
That's a good question. I guess for myself, I never saw being a woman as a barrier to anything that I wanted to do. When I was studying in school, studying biology and ecology, there was a big push to get more women in science, and yet I think that a lot of doors were opening because of the pioneering work that some women had done before, being the first woman into, I worked for a woman who was the first woman hired into the fisheries department at the college, and because of that, it opened a lot of doors for other people. And yeah, I mean, women-run farms are in the minority, but there are more and more women-run farms coming around now. And I think that people really just need to follow their hearts and their passion as to the kind of work they want to do on a daily basis. And if it is a quote-unquote, like, man's job, like, I think just forge ahead. And, somebody has to, like, break those barriers for it to be more open for more women in like male-dominated workforces. And I think that really, like, networking, the farm I worked at in Seattle was run by husband and wife, but the wife was really the one who kind of started the business up, and then her husband, to spend more time with her, had to come help out on the farm.
Sure.
And learned that he enjoyed it. And so I think, part of the reason I was drawn to working at that farm was it was a woman, she was only a few years older than me, who had started up a farm, and I really looked towards her mentorship to see how this could be done, and talking to other female farmers, when I was out and about at the farmers market, or even here when I moved to northern Kentucky, connecting with some women farmers. I think you got to expand your network and look for those colleagues. And especially if you feel like you're in the minority, you got to seek out those people who are doing what you want to do, and I would say there's no limit to what you can achieve if you really are passionate about it. And so I wouldn't let any doors close on you just because you're a woman or whatever, fill in the blank minority in a certain type of career path.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think more important than sex or race, especially now in 2019, the two things that are going to lead you to success or cause you to fail: confidence and social interaction. We have a huge decline, especially with the younger generation who grew up on phones. I was talking about this on my podcast last night. The expediter at the local Starbucks, he talked like this. And so people's orders were sitting in there getting cold because he was too afraid to say, hey, and one, at my local Starbucks, they stopped asking people's names, so I won't even get started on that. But instead of calling out, triple grande white mocha hot, ready, it's a triple white grande. And so people, and one lady said, hey, I'm waiting on my egg whites, and he whispered something, and she, 5 minutes later, she followed him down there, and he walked up, and it had been sitting in front of her the whole time, but because he's so afraid to enunciate and to talk to strangers, this poor lady's food was sitting there getting cold because it was sitting in front of her because she didn't hear him call up the food was. And I know there was a story of about 2 years ago, Washington State Police, I believe it was, the police academy, they were having problems with their cadets. They had no social interaction skills, so what they actually had to do was create a new curriculum at the police academy where they were taking these recruits down to the local mall in plain clothes and forcing them to walk up to strangers and just have regular conversation and make eye contact. Because if you're going to be in law enforcement, your number one role is being able to talk to people. And not only in law enforcement, and no matter what you do. Could you imagine trying to create the relationships you have now when you first started at the farmer's market or volunteering at farms if you were bashful, kept to yourself, and you didn't ask questions or get involved in people's conversations?
Yeah, it's impossible to go to the farmer's market if you don't like talking to people. You're not going to sell any vegetables. So
it's impossible to be successful.
You've got to do it whether you like it or not.
I think the only place you're going to succeed in this world as a recluse is computer programming. Other than that, you got to be able to talk to people. It doesn't matter what the job is. Confidence and social interaction will get you most of the way home. And then obviously you got to have self-motivation and a motor and good work ethic. With all that stuff,
I think
you're halfway home.
I think you're totally right, and I do think a lot of the success of my farm so far is just the relationships that have been built. You know what I mean? With we haven't even really talked that much about the community-supported agriculture program that I run, but it's about relationships with the people buying the food from you. And they could buy. There are so many options for buying food now, like Kroger. You can order your stuff online and have it put into your trunk. You can have it delivered to your door. So why is somebody going to take that extra effort to get it from a farm? It's about the relationship and wanting to support me as a farmer and getting a good quality product. There has to be a reason for them to want to do it. And if you don't build those relationships, then it's easy to get food somewhere else. So you've got to put yourself out there. And luckily for me, I've never really had a problem with that. I'm more of an extroverted personality. I've met a lot of introverts working on farms because it's a great place to just go get lost in a kale patch.
There you go.
Not just do whatever you want to do. But I will say it also is a place where people aren't on their phones. You don't have technology in your face. It is a time. All the farms I've worked on, I've connected with my coworkers and my bosses because you're kind of stripped down to just like, yeah, we're out here, we're doing hard work, we're in nature, but we're going to talk to each other while we're at it, And so I think it's a good place to be, whether you have a propensity to be extroverted or introverted. But for sure, when it comes to moving those vegetables and selling them, you've got to build relationships. You've got to be able to talk to people one-on-one. You got to look them in the eye, and you got to be able to tell them the story of why they should be buying your produce instead of somebody else's.
Well, let's take a few minutes before I let you go and talk about your community-supported agricultural program. How did that start, and what does people do to get involved in your local area?
Yeah, so the farm that I worked on in Seattle had a community supported agriculture program, a CSA for short. And what the way that that program works is individuals sign up with the farm at the beginning of the year. So they decide at the beginning of the year they're going to support a local farm and a local farmer. And they basically pre-buy their vegetables for the season. And so in a lot of ways, it's like a magazine subscription. You kind of pay up front, and then you get your allotment of vegetables every week. And so here in Kentucky, I can grow produce reliably for about half the year, like in quantity. So folks can sign up with our farm at the beginning of the year, and then starting mid-May, they get a box of vegetables every week. And in that box, you're going to get a wide variety of what's growing on the farm, whatever's best and most beautiful and, most abundant at the time. And so it switches up from week to week. So beginning middle of May, you get a box of vegetables. You get another one every single week right up until Thanksgiving. And so in that way, buying the veggies ahead of time really helps me as a farmer because there's a lot of upfront cost every spring to buy all my amendments for soil, to buy my seed, to buy any supplies I need. And you spend a lot of time and labor. I'm paying people to help me here on the farm, getting all those crops in the ground before you ever have anything you can harvest off of it. And so by entering into this relationship with individual customers that want to support a farm, they're really helping us out at the beginning of the year, and then they reap the benefits by getting a share of the harvest every week. And what I've heard from the people that participate, and right now we have 50 households, off our little 1 acre, we're sending vegetables every week to 50 households. It really challenges people to eat locally, to cook more. They know they're getting a good, clean, quality product. They make new recipes. I also send a newsletter every week that says, hey, this is what you're getting this week. Here's some great recipe ideas. Here's also what's happening on the farm. So it's a lot about that relationship building. Like people know about the farm they're supporting. They feel like truly a member of the farm. And it changes the way that they eat. It changes the way that they cook at home. Hopefully it changes the way they sit down and interact, with their family members or members of their household around a meal. And hopefully it changes the way that they think about farming and agriculture in their community. And by supporting my farm, you're supporting, 1 good acre of agriculture. And so if we kind of had a system that was more like that, a lot of people directly supporting a farm, think about the acreage of farmland people could help preserve and kind of support through their like weekly food dollars that they could be spending somewhere else.
Now you said you're sending produce out. Now I'm assuming that means are you doing it through shipping companies or just a local driver? I mean, I guess the reason I ask is what is the range in which you support? Are people all local? Do you mail 2 hours away? What people want, like for example, we have a lot of listeners up in Columbus, Ohio, Northern Kentucky. If people wanted to support you, what range? How close do they got to live to your farm in order to do so?
So we send vegetables out to Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky, and the way that it works is we actually do the deliveries, but we don't deliver direct to a single household. We have neighborhood pickup spots. So we have one in Union. You can pick up here on the farm. We have one in Covington. We have some in neighborhoods in Cincinnati as well. And the way that it works out is normally, a CSA member, normally people who've been doing this for a couple years in a row will offer up, hey, you can use my porch as a pickup spot, and my neighbors that live, around me and want to participate can pick up right here on my porch. So we'll deliver. For example, when we go to Union, we have 10 shares, 10 boxes that we drop off on a porch, and then folks come and pick up between 4 and 8 p.m., and it's every Tuesday. And so they don't have to drive a long way. They can choose the neighborhood they want to pick up in that's closest to them. And in a way, too, it kind of helps you to get to know your neighbors a little bit more. Like I know our CSA member in Covington that hosts as a pickup spot. Sometimes he'll just go sit on the porch with his grandson just to talk to the other CSA members that come to pick up their their boxes, you know, and get to know the neighbors a little bit more. And so, yeah, it's not as easy as delivering right to your door, but it is within, you know, a short drive and at a neighborhood location.
Well, not only are you delivering fine produce, but you're also building community, which is something that's lacking in our country nowadays. If somebody's in the northern Kentucky area and they're interested in becoming a member of your CSA, where would they go?
The first place to go is just to go to our website. So the farm is Darkwood Farm, and our web address is darkwoodfarmstead.com, like homestead, but a farm. And you can browse around there. We have a link specifically about the Community Supported Agriculture Program. And tomorrow we send out our 13th week of boxes for the season, and so we have 13 more weeks to go for the rest of the season up until Thanksgiving. And a lot of people like to think that, you know, at least if you have a home garden, you could probably just plant it once for the season, pick what's there, and then you're done. But we're still planting. We will have produce until December at least. And if it's a mild winter, some of our produce will go through into January, even February. Even though it's the height of tomato season and everything now, we still have many more weeks to go for the rest of the growing season.
Now, I know you have a pretty active Instagram page. If people want to follow you on Instagram, where would they go?
On Instagram, I'm Darkwood Farmer.
Now, I was up in Kentucky, northern Kentucky last summer, and I got to go down to my favorite place that was recently rebuilt after burning to the ground. That is the Rabbit Hash General Store.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, I was name dropping. I was talking to the lady at Rabbit Hash, and I said, "Do you know Annie Woods?" She's like, "Yes, I do. She comes up here and plays bass when we have our farm parties." I said, "That's my cousin." That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Annie is my cousin. That's how we've known each other for so long. And
yes.
She is my cousin, and we're so proud of her. Let me ask you a question, Annie. Just recently, I got hired on. I just did my first job as a background actor on a TV show that's coming out in 2020. It's a big project. But I was talking to the assistant director, and he was asking me, you know, because this is a military-based TV show, and I'm talking to him. I'm in my uniform. I'm playing the role of a Navy officer. And he looked at me and said, "Are you in the military?" And I said, "No, I'm a living historian. This is what we do. I'm used to wearing uniforms." And he's from Europe. He's like, "I'm not familiar with that term." I said, "Well, I do World War II reenacting." He's like, "Well, I'm interested in that. Let me come find you later." And he left. And I thought he was just being nice to the background actor. And he actually tracked me down. Now, this is the director of the episode I'm working background on. And he comes up to me and says, "Hey, Dan, tell me more about this living history stuff." Now, I've had teachers call me Dan that I've had for years. And now Dan and Don is easily interchangeable. Now, obviously, I didn't correct the director. I told him what the World War II stuff was, and he looked at me and said, "I like you. I want to have you back for more episodes." And in my head, I'm thinking, great, but you don't know my name. So I ask you this.
That's awesome.
I tell you that to say this. One, I'm sure he'll track me down because Wardrobe has photos of me for continuity purposes in my uniform, and they'll probably say there's no Dan, but there is a Don. But we talked about this on my podcast, and on the casting company's website, there is a spot for a screen name. And I thought about doing this when I first started my podcast. How would you feel about me going with my middle name and our grandfather's first name, Preston, instead of Don Abernathy if I go with Preston Abernathy?
I love that name.
I thought about going full-blown
yeah.
Preston Woods. But the reason I want to hold on to the Abernathy, and the other reason I want to go with the screen name, is there is already a successful screenwriter named Don Abernathy in Hollywood. He's an African-American gentleman, so clearly people won't confuse us that much. But when they're Googling the name, I don't want people to think I'm this successful screenwriter and I'm nothing more than just a background actor. And two, Abernathy already has a name. You know, that's Martin Luther King's best friend was Robert Abernathy. That's why there's an Abernathy Boulevard in Atlanta. There's an Abernathy Boulevard in Naples, Florida. So clearly I want to hold on to the Abernathy side. But what do you think of Preston Abernathy?
I love it. Honestly, I really love the name Preston, and it's, you know, all throughout our family, there's men with Preston in their name. And I think it's not that common of a name, and so it kind of stands out a little bit, and I really like it.
It does have a Hollywood sound to it, too. Preston.
Yeah. Well, I was driving the other day over on the Ohio side of the river, and I passed a subdivision called Coleman Woods, and I was like, what? Because
Nice.
that's our grandfather's middle and last name, Preston Coleman Woods. So I just thought that was so funny to be driving around and see that on the big marquee on a subdivision, Coleman Woods, which is also another name that Coleman that goes around in our family and the men in our family. But it was really important to me when I was naming the farm. I wanted to pay homage to our family name, and so I was thinking about something Woods, something, and I really liked the idea of I didn't have a specific piece of family land to move back to and start my farm.
Sadly.
And so I wanted to have the name in there somehow, but I also wanted it to pay homage to what my end goal was, right? To have a beautiful piece of land that had a lot of forest on it. Yeah, it's a farm, but it's mostly wild. That was my idea, and so that's kind of how I ended up on Dark Wood Farm, and I thought about Dark Woods Farm, but kind of Darkwood Farm rolled off the tongue a little bit more. But it was important to me to have a piece of the family name in there, somehow. And it's not only on our side of the family that we have a farming history, dairy farming, but on the other side of my family, my great grandmother and grandfather on my mom's side had a little farm not too far from where I grew up, and so I wanted to make sure that the family history was in there somehow,
Absolutely. I think it's a great name. I've always loved the name. It's Annie Woods.
Well,
She's my cousin, but more importantly, she is one badass farmer. She's a strong, independent woman. She's successful in everything she does, and she is the key supplier to some of the better, higher-end restaurants throughout Cincinnati and Covington. Who knows, maybe Emilio Estevez is eating your produce while eating out downtown. You can find her at Darkwood.
You know what is
Go ahead.
so funny? I actually was dropping off at a bakery one day in Over the Rhine, and Emilio Estevez came out with a loaf of bread from the bakery. So
I'm telling you, he said he loves Cincinnati. He spends 6 to 7 months out of the year there. He's actually talking about building his production company there. He's going to start filming out of Cincinnati. He said it reminds him of New York. He walks everywhere. People are great to him. They don't harass him. And he says just like being in New York in 1960. And he is completely over the moon with Cincinnati. And I think that's great.
And I will say that most of the people that I know who've had him come into their restaurant or whatever say he's the nicest guy you can ever meet. So it's really great that he's advocating for the city, and he's doing it through actually being part of the community. So.
Well, Annie, thank you so much for joining us on the fourth or fifth, I think it's the fifth episode of the Fail to Fail podcast, the motivational podcast. We're trying to motivate people to find success and find happiness in life. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
And hopefully I will see you the next time I'm up in Kentucky.
Yeah, I would love that. We just all got together for Robin's retirement weekend, retirement party, so it's good to catch up with everybody. And it's amazing how fast time flies. We're all almost 40 or in our 40s now. It's hard to believe.
Well, I will talk to you soon, and you have a great week.
All right, you too.